Hey guys, Joe here with Steel Ops. We have Sam from Prep Medic joining us today, and we're going to talk about the new IFAK kit that we're offering through shop.steelops.com. It's really important that we have somebody with a little bit of medical background in here. And Sam, would you be willing to tell us just a little bit about your background, what you've done, and kind of what makes you a subject matter expert on this stuff?
Expert is a strong word. I've been a paramedic for about 10 years, cut my teeth in Iowa, have worked in a lot of tactical EMS teams as an entry team member and now as an ancillary TEMS member. Right now I'm working as a critical care flight paramedic here in Colorado, so I don't know if I'm a subject matter expert, but I know a little bit about bleeding control at least.
Certainly more than me, and that's why he's here. And we want to talk about the IFAK just simply because, guys, if you're buying body armor from us, this is a really nice add-on. If you're planning on stopping holes, it's probably a good idea to be able to treat them if they do happen. Let's talk about the IFAK and just what's in it, how it can be used, and if it's a good fit for everybody, because it may not be, right? So let's start by talking about what an IFAK is and what it is intended to do and what it's not intended to do. This is the IFAK kit that we're offering. It's sold in a molle pouch, and inside it's got various components like a tourniquet, chest seals, and stuff like that. Sam, in terms of what somebody should be looking for in an IFAK, can you tell me, before we kind of break this down, what are the minimum basics that an IFAK should have?
Yeah, so an IFAK, the whole thought behind an IFAK, which stands for Individual First Aid Kit, is it's a life-saving kit. It's the first 5 minutes. This isn't prolonged care. This isn't something that's going to keep you going for weeks. It's not like a bug-out bag kit or anything like that. This kit is purely to address the things that are going to kill you right now. So in an IFAK, what I look for is something that is going to address massive hemorrhage, that's going to kill somebody, and that's going to at least give us a quick way to open somebody's airway. It might not protect it all the way, but at least they're going to be able to move air, and something that's going to be able to deal with some kind of thoracic trauma on top of that. So you kind of talked about what's in it. Like, IFAKs are not standardized because there's a lot of different stuff on the market, but those threats are usually what's going into these kits, no matter who the manufacturer is.
In terms of the training that I've had, we're talking about things like a tourniquet for extremities. We're talking about things like chest seals to address the thoracic cavity. And we're talking about maybe like a hemostatic gauze or some sort of gauze to address joints, junctions, and stuff like that, wound packing. In this kit, we have some components that I think are considered advanced practice tools, correct? Can you touch on those just a little bit and tell us what that means and kind of what the liabilities are a little bit there?
Right, so basic Stop the Bleed course that is teaching tourniquets and wound packing is going to teach you most of what you need to know in these kits, and that's something where we have good case law to say that you are protected with the Good Samaritan laws there. You can go out and do that with a Stop the Bleed kit and do your best for somebody. But when it comes into some of the advanced practice things, when we're talking about like a decompression needle, I'm going to pull this out here, decompression needle for tension pneumothoraces. This is something that you're probably not going to be protected on the Good Samaritan laws. So like, even as a paramedic, if I'm not functioning in my duties as a paramedic, this is something that I wouldn't usually perform in everyday life. And then you have kind of your intermediate kind of advanced practice things, such as your nasopharyngeal airways, which this is something you can learn to do, and I'd say it's one level lower than this as far as like difficulty. It's pretty easy, but once again, something that unless you're specifically trained on it, you do have to be a little bit careful doing that. Everything else in here, if you know CPR and Stop the Bleed, you're going to be good to go, and this kit's going to do everything you need to do.
And that's important, guys. We just want to make sure that we get that information out there. This kit does not make you EMS. It does not make you qualified to treat any of these injuries. You've got to go out and get training from those places and figure out how to use this equipment properly. That said, let's break down this kit a little bit. First thing that you'll find when you open this thing up is a tourniquet. These are Gen 7, I believe, CAT tourniquets. What's your opinion on these, Sam?
So the CAT tourniquet's been around forever. It was one of the first tourniquets approved by the Committee for Tactical Combat Casualty Care, and Interestingly enough, the second you put on armor, the importance of a good windlass style tourniquet goes up, because if you have armor on, you have a higher chance of getting hit in an extremity, having a life-threatening bleed there and having to use the tourniquet. Whereas with no armor on, you still have a chance of getting hit in the extremity, but we've seen a lot of shooting data in the United States to suggest that people get shot more in the chest because it's just a bigger area. So this is important no matter what, but the importance goes up while you're wearing body armor of any kind.
And I've heard a lot of guys talk about needing maybe more than one tourniquet. This kit only includes one. What's your opinion on having, on buying another one and having a backup?
If you can have multiple ones, I think that's great. You run out of real estate pretty quick. They do weigh something. They're not heavy. You don't need to necessarily carry 5. This kit has packing gauze, so if you apply the tourniquet, it doesn't work, you tighten it again, it's still not working completely, you can take that packing gauze and you can start packing the wound on the extremity. Just because we normally use it in a junctional site doesn't mean it's going to be ineffective when it comes to an extremity injury like that. So you do have enough like ancillary supplies where you can make it work and go to a plan B if you absolutely have to. So I don't think you necessarily need a second one. If you can carry it, great, but if you don't, it's not a huge deal.
Next we have the vintage chest seals. These are sold in a set, and I'd like Sam to kind of explain why that's important, but these are basically for treating penetrating wounds to the thoracic cavity, correct?
Yeah, they have a couple other uses, but mainly vented chest seals are to seal what we call an open pneumothorax, so a sucking chest wound. So if somebody's been shot in the chest, when they take a breath, it's going to suck air into that hole that's created, and it will make your lung much less compliant, so it's not going to expand as much as it would if you're just breathing normally. So with this, that seals that wound, but it also allows for some of that pressure to escape and that air to escape, so you don't develop what we call a tension pneumothorax, which is where a needle decompression comes in. So these are kind of the safest option for that incident. The other thing is it comes with 2, because a lot of times you will have an entrance and an exit wound on that. So if you've sealed one, you're going to have to seal the other one for it to be effective. So this one has 2 in it, and I'd always recommend getting some kind of twin pack if you can.
So next up we have one package of Quick Clot combat gauze. Now Quick Clot makes several different varieties of gauze and hemostatic agents, and there's other ones out on the market. Sam, can you explain why this particular one, or what the advantages and disadvantages of this particular type are?
Right, so you have different agents that can go into this gauze. Now, first and foremost, gauze is super important. You see a lot like Walmart shelves will have like this bleed stop powder that you pour on things. You have the old Quick Clot powder that you'd pour into wounds, and early generations had issues with getting hot. They've kind of resolved those issues, but what we know is that pressure is really the thing that matters. So this has a Quick Clot powder in it to aid in that hemostasis, to aid in that clotting. It will definitely help you. But what's really helping people with this gauze is actually packing it up against that artery, making sure that pressure is exerted on that artery and stopping that arterial bleed. This one is kind of the gold standard. It's what a lot of our military uses for some kind of hemostatic agent. And that hemostatic agent just kind of supplements everything you're doing, and it makes it that much easier, especially if you're in a violent situation where you need to pack the wound and you need to move quickly. That's where this is going to have an advantage, because it will stop that bleeding that much faster and allow you to pack the wound, wrap it quick, and move the patient with a much reduced risk of rebleeding or that bleeding through this gauze. So that's really where this comes in.
Cool. The other thing that I think is sort of unique to this gauze, maybe not in particular, but to this type of gauze, is that it has this X-ray detectable band in it. Can you explain, just in your experience, how important having that and being able to, once they reach a higher level of care, being able to identify that that gauze is actually in that wound?
Yeah, so that's a big deal when it comes to the operating room. Obviously, somebody's not getting gauze shoved in their body, and they're not just going to heal with that in them. They need a surgeon. This is a temporizing measure. So when that patient goes into the CT room or gets their x-rays done prior to surgery, that will allow the surgeon to see that that gauze is in the wound and make sure all of it is out before they start closing the person up. So it's just kind of one way to not get yelled at quite as much by the trauma surgeon.
Excellent. All right, next up we have a pretty generic piece of gear. This is just trauma shears, but in my opinion, a pretty critical component to an IFAK kit. Sam, why would you want to use trauma shears as opposed to just a knife, the knife that I'm carrying on me, every day?
Well, I mean, trauma shears is super important because you can't treat what you can't see. So you're going to have to expose somebody somehow in that, down coats can absorb a couple liters of blood before you're going to start seeing it externally. So being able to cut somebody's clothes off is super important. Knives, you're going to stab the person, you're going to cause worse injuries. Even like seatbelt hooks, they've found that people will be taking off somebody's pant leg and they'll have a splayed injury, and that seatbelt hook will actually catch on that injury and open them a little bit wider. So you're going to be causing more damage than you were before. So trauma shears are super great. You've got the safety tip here, so you're not actually going to start cutting into their flesh and making a bad situation even worse.
Great. Next up, included in the kit, it's just some generic stuff, some nitrile gloves. Nitrile, I think, is borderline preferred over latex just because some people have a latex allergy. Is that right?
Yeah, latex allergies are super common, so I haven't even seen a latex glove in a long time. Just if you're using a glove, make sure it's nitrile. These North American Rescue gloves are great, but if you buy this kit, just make sure when you get it, you open it up out of this and make sure that the gloves are expanded, because it is kind of hard to put on if you're in a rush, you're opening it from this packaging for the first time.
All right, next up, we've got the North American Rescue emergency trauma dressing. My understanding, this is a pretty versatile tool, right, that can be used for a lot of different things. Why is this important to have in a kit?
Yeah, so this gauze is essentially a pressure bandage, and while we are using packing gauze and a tourniquet for your life-threatening arterial bleeds, a lot of times bleeds are not necessarily life-threatening arterial bleeds, but they're still serious. So you have somebody with a gash on their head, they look like they're gonna die. They look horrible. They got blood running down their face, and obviously that's not operational. You do have to stop that bleeding covered up. So this is great for wrapping wounds like that. Additionally though, once you've packed somebody's wound, you've packed a junctional site, unless you are able to hold with your hand that entire time throughout transport to the hospital and definitive care, you're going to need something to hold that pressure and keep that gauze in. So that's where wrapping it with an ETD is going to come in to be able to hold that pressure and not take you out of the fight for a prolonged period of time. It's also really tiring to hold your hand over somebody's wound for an hour or two.
All right. All bleeding is bad. Next up, we have a Sharpie. Really underrated tool that should really be in every trauma kit. This is not just for writing down tourniquet time though, right? I mean, we can do all kinds of things with this. What other uses have you seen just for a simple Sharpie tool out in the field?
I mean, really, it's kind of endless. So Sharpies are going to work in a lot of different environments, and they can write on a lot of different surfaces, which is why I prefer a Sharpie over like a ballpoint pen if I could just have one. So tourniquet time is important. When you look at the time strip here, you have this pulled across. Tourniquets cause metabolic buildup, and you can cause a lot of problems releasing them if they've been on for a long period of time. So this is really good information to have at the receiving hospital. But additionally, if you're like even writing down patient demographics or allergies or filling out your injury card for the patient, you can use a Sharpie and make that really easy to do. You can write on skin with it really easily. So if this is covered with blood, you got some room on their forehead, you can write important information on their forehead. Maybe not the most dignified thing to do, but it definitely works.
Whatever saves their life. So in terms of this kit, is this a kit that you would feel comfortable going out with alone? And where is the limitation of this? Where does a person need to think about adding on to this kit, and in what circumstance would that be?
Right, so funny enough, the Eagle IFAK was one of the first kits I ever looked at on my channel. It was actually the first kit I ever bought with my own money because it is so compact. I still carry one with me on my backpack every day. And what I like about this kit in particular is that you can mount it somewhere, but then you can also pull out the insert and get it around front, get it into your workspace. So really like that. It's expandable if you do want more stuff. Now, kind of like we talked about at the beginning of the video, these kits are for the first 5 minutes. A lot of people think these are like disaster kits, that this is going to get you through a war zone on its own. And the reality is, if you have a tourniquet on, you've packed a wound, like, they need a surgeon. You're not going to do that prolonged care they need. So understanding that this is for the first 5 minutes right now until you can get more help to you or get them to definitive care like a hospital, that's where these come in. If you are planning to do something like backwoods, where you're going to be a long ways away from definitive medical help, you need to look at getting more training, because you're going to need more training to do that prolonged care. But 2, you need to expand that kit to start including things like bandage changes, antibiotics, like going way into the weeds of medicine, which is obviously not something that, you know, a small kit mounted on your plate carrier is going to be able to do.
Gotcha. Well, and another great source of that information and some of the equipment that you can use for those applications is going to be on Sam's page. That's Prep Medic. You can find him on YouTube. A ton of subscribers, just an absolute wealth of knowledge, and a lot of videos that you can check out. Anything new coming up on your channel that people should be looking out for?
Oh man, I'm flying by the seat of my pants. So we've got a video with you guys testing some of the Steel Ops armor, but you know, other than that, it's week to week.
Well, thanks so much, Sam, for coming in and joining us and talking about this kit. Guys, this is available at shop.steelops.com. And again, with any questions about training, use of these products, for sure check out Prep Medic, and make sure you go out and get some training, guys. Thanks a lot.